So, just before services, Cantor, Abby, and I were talking about how we can't believe that it has been 4 full years that we have been here at Temple. It's pretty amazing how quickly time flies and how much life changes in that time and all of that. But so when I was thinking about my sermon tonight, I realized that there's something you might not yet know about me. And so what you might not know, and it feels like a little embarrassing to tell you, is that in high school, I had the privilege of being part of an improv and sketch comedy troupe. Some of you may be very surprised. Some of you may be like, yeah, I can see that. So while I generally like to think of myself as funny, it was being in that group that really challenged me to understand what that term even meant. In my earlier youth, I had been gifted, much to my parents' dismay, the gift of a witty retort or remark. My one-liners earned me a reputation as a bit of a class clown, but don't worry, I was very respectful. It's just like if I saw that opening, I had to take it. So it was not until I joined this comedy troupe that I realized my humor up until that point had mostly relied on just a quick one-liner or something of that sort, making a quick pun, which I still enjoy and appreciate. So if you have some, we can talk after the service. But so clearly as an overly confident 17-year-old, I was expecting to be a comedy star. I showed up for my first day of the selective class feeling as though I had earned my place and that I knew what it took to be successful in this context. AKA, I thought I was hilarious and thought that that's how it would continue. I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. What happened instead was a year of repeating the same terrifying process over and over and over and over again. And I'll tell you, had I known going in that it was going to be like that, I am not sure I would have auditioned because I'm not sure I would have been brave enough. So what is this terrifying process? A group of about 20 of us were giving writing assignments, usually in preparation for our next sketch comedy show, think Saturday Night Live style, except much less funny. Each day in class, a few individuals were chosen to present their material. Scripts were distributed to a few who would act the skit out for the class. It was incredible, the coolest thing to see our work, our thoughts, our ideas come to life in this class as we would do these script readings. But then the terrifying part came, as you probably guessed, where we would review each other's work, give feedback, share concerns, make suggestions, and offer praise. Though, of course, in a room of high school seniors, praise was often lacking. So we repeated our review process for when we worked on our improv skills as well. So while, yes, improv is short for improvisation, anyone who's been part of an improv group can tell you the importance of practicing. A lot of it has to do with building trust as a group and making sure that you get a flow for things. So there's a lot, anytime you've seen an improv show, that group has practiced together hours and hours and hours. So the things that stuck with me all these years is how vulnerable and honest we had to be with each other. As a 17-year-old, I'm like, how did I let them do that to me? But it was an incredible experience. There were days where we left class, and of course, it was like the first class of the day, so then you had to go to all your other classes. But you felt like you would put yourself out there and just to be punched in the gut. But I can tell you there's also no other class I remember more about, no other teacher I learned more from, and no group of classmates from high school I remember better. While this may sound like a cute trip down memory lane, there is a reason I'm sharing it with you tonight. As I was reflecting on Sukkot, our week-long holiday celebrated by embracing vulnerability, I couldn't help thinking to myself, everything I needed to know about the lessons of Sukkot, I learned from improv. Sukkot, as Rabbi Alan Liu puts it, is about being flush with life. Nothing between you and living. Taking down the boundaries between us and the outside world, hoping that we do that internally as well. We may shake the lulav, but Sukkot also shakes us from our norms, gets us out of the comfort of our homes. The shofar during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur woke us up to our lives. Sukkot is when we put on our shoes and get back to the work of living. But this time, hopefully, the idea is that we'll do it more honestly than before. The impermanent nature of the sukkah reminds us that as much as we love to surround ourselves with strong buildings of brick and mortar, they cannot change the fact that there's only so much that is in our control. We plan, we prepare, we plot, and we pretend that we can control every aspect of our lives. On Sukkot, Rabbi Liu says, we leave the formal world behind. We sit in a house that is only the idea of a house, a house that calls attention to the illusory nature of all houses. The sukkah seeks to suggest that control is also an illusion. While that may sound like a downer, and if any of you were at my study of Ecclesiastes on Monday, you may feel like this is my new thing. But I'd like to share, again, another name of Sukkot, which I've said already tonight, which is Zman Simchatenu, the season of our joy. So here we are being reminded of our mortality, that we have no control. Perhaps we're being reminded of our insignificance in the universe. We may be frightened of acknowledging our lack of control. And then we're told, but celebrate. This is the time. Zman Simchatenu, rejoice, rejoice. Judaism does not teach us to despair in the face of being human and of being not all-powerful. Our faith teaches us to know that, embrace that, and to find a way to the joy anyway. We're reminded again and again and again, if you haven't noticed by this time during this high holiday season, that life is too short, and it's too short to spend it not being vulnerable. While the lessons of improv may contribute to comedic effect, they also teach us how to be more vulnerable. Many of you are probably familiar with the rules of improv, but to make sure we're on the same page, I want to remind you of just a few that will help us live a little bit more openly in 5780. On many lists about the rule of improv, you'll find the phrase, don't deny, or said another way, say yes, agree. In improv, this means when someone says, hey, I can't believe we climbed to the top of this mountain. You can't then look at them and say, we didn't do that, because that's not funny. It shuts down the scene. It ends any possibilities of going somewhere together with another person. Sometimes we hide behind what is comfortable. We stop saying yes to things that scare us, even a little, whether it's an invitation to a social gathering, accepting an invitation to speak at a work lunch, or adding something to your already overloaded schedule. Sometimes saying yes frees us of our isolation. Saying no keeps our walls up. The sukkah reminds us that life is supposed to be uncomfortable, whether or not you sleep in the sukkah. Next is the rule of yes and, similar to say yes, but yes and teaches us to add something of ourselves. As the wise sage Tina Fey teaches, yes and, did you catch that? Yes and means don't be afraid to contribute. It's your responsibility to contribute. Always make sure you're adding something to the discussion, she says. Your initiations are worthwhile. In the sukkah too, we are to add something of ourselves, either by our presence, by our conversation, by bringing food, or just by bringing joy. Another rule of improv is to make statements. Again, Tina Fey writes, this is a positive way of saying don't ask questions all the time. If you do that, you're putting all the pressure on the other person to come up with answers. In other words, whatever the problem is, be part of the solution, she says. Don't just sit around raising questions and pointing out obstacles. I'm not giving you permission to only talk about yourself, but I am saying that sometimes, instead of being vulnerable and really having an exchange with another person, we might seem a little more interested in someone else as a way to not talk about ourselves. It can seem like a better form to ask questions, as I said, but again, we may be putting up walls that Sukkot reminds us we need to take down. Our final rule of improv that we'll talk about, though there are many more, and I can see some comedians out in the kahal, in the community, who may have some that they want to add later. But the final rule for improv, and therefore for Sukkot vulnerability, is that there are no mistakes, only opportunities. Sometimes the world gets the better of us and we feel like failures. We take defeat personally and we beat ourselves up. Sukkot reminds us that we can pick ourselves up again. Despite having no real control or power in this world, the thing we can control is how we connect to and treat others. Sukkot invites us to open our hearts and our hands, embrace that which is uncertain, and still find reasons for joy. There is joy in being open. There is joy in being vulnerable, and there is joy in doing it together. Because after all, it's Zman Simchatenu. It's a time of our rejoicing. So I wish you all a Moedim L'Simcha, a joyous Sukkot, and a Shabbat Shalom.